Hello, my AP Psych students. I've got a sad moment here. This is the last set of notes. Therefore, it is the last psychology concept I will ever teach you. New psychology concept. Yes, we do have a month of review that's going to lead up to the AP exam, but as far as teaching you, this is the last thing I have to teach you. This is a sad moment for me. I so wish that we were here together to do this and we could cry together and all that, but it is what it is. Let me just say, guys, I have had more fun than I can explain teaching you guys this year and going through these things, and I'm learning them myself because this is my first year teaching it and just getting to share it with you guys. It has been so much stinking fun, and I wouldn't have traded it for anything. So again, I so wish you guys were here to share this with me in person, but we're gonna have to make do. Anyway, the last thing we're gonna learn as part of our social psychology unit is altruism, conflict, and cooperation. Now, altruism is not a word you probably hear very often. You're probably more familiar with the word charity, which is kind of along the same lines, but a definition of altruism, a genuine and unselfish concern for the welfare of others. Oftentimes, essentially what it means is you sacrifice yourself for the betterment of others. Now, the question might be, why do people do this? This would seem counterintuitive to a lot of things that would be instinctual to us, right? Survival or just self-promoting or things like that. So why do people act altruistically or charitably? Well, there are three theories, and again, not any one of them is probably the right one. They all probably work together, but three theories on why that is. Now this one, the first one, the social exchange theory, it warms the cockles of my heart because I am, at my core, an economist. And what the social exchange theory says, basically you weigh the costs and the benefits of an action. You're hoping that the benefits of helping someone, now what benefits would you get by helping someone? Well, if you've ever helped someone, you know, a lot of times people walk away saying, I thought I was gonna help others, I was the one being blessed. Why were you the one being blessed? Because when you help others, you get maybe a sense of reduced guilt over the fact that you have been blessed and other people are not, and so you get to maybe alleviate some of that guilt by helping them. Certainly social approval. People often think highly of you, and your stature among other people gets increased because you're helping others. And of course, just good feelings. You go in there and it feels good to help people. So those are some of the benefits. Of course, the cost, you got to give up your time. You got to give up sometimes your money. You got to make sacrifices. So the bottom line is, if we weigh all that and we feel like those benefits, those perceived benefits are greater than the perceived cost, we say, I will help. If it's the reverse, if the costs outweigh the benefits, we don't help. Now, admittedly, even though I am an economist at heart, that doesn't, while that explains probably a lot of it, it doesn't explain all of it. There are times where people genuinely sacrifice with very little public fanfare or any reciprocating benefits to themselves, and so that doesn't explain all of it. So there are a couple other opinions. The second one is what's called reciprocal altruism. Essentially, it's the idea that I'm helping this person because I expect in the future they're probably going to help me in return. Okay, so it's kind of the idea you've heard, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. It's just kind of like, have you ever seen The Godfather? The gentleman comes to the Godfather at the beginning of the movie asking for a favor, to which the Godfather responds, yes, I'll do you this favor, but someday, and that day may never come, I will call upon you for a favor, right? And so it's kind of like, all right, I'm going to help you, but I expect at some point now you owe me one, and it's going to get paid back. And so sometimes we have that expectation. Sometimes it's simply we feel it as a social responsibility. We recognize that it's good to help those people who need help. And that's encouraged, certain cultures encourage that more than others, and religion in particular. They've found strong connections between religion and religious affiliation with this type of altruism. In fact, people that are deeply religious are 50% more likely to help others in need, to give to charity, and to do things like that. And so religion plays a big role in that because it encourages helping your brother and that kind of stuff, the golden rule. So that's generally why we help people. Now, sometimes we don't help people. And so interesting, in a moment you're going to watch a video that highlights this and really sparked some of this research and experiments and all that. But basically, we are most likely to help someone when these three things are true. Number one, obviously we have to notice the incident. If we don't see it or aren't aware of it, there's no way we can help, right? So we have to notice that there's an incident, we notice it. Number two, we interpret the incident as an emergency. So we're walking down the hall or we're in a public place and we see somebody collapse in front of us. Are they joking around? Did they just simply trip? Do we perceive that it's an old person who's having a heart attack and they need, so we're going to evaluate the situation. If it seems like, oh, no big deal, we're probably not likely to help. If we think it's a big deal, an emergency, we're more likely to help. And this is very important, the third one, we assume responsibility for the incident. Now, if we are the only ones around, if we're walking in a place and we're the only ones there and we see somebody else fall, we are almost always going to go over and try to do something, try to help out, whatever else. Unfortunately, when there are a lot of people around, we experience what's called the bystander effect. So we are less likely to give aid when others are present. Why? We simply assume somebody else is going to do it. And so sometimes this is an important term that you need to know called diffusion of responsibility. Again, we assume other people are around, they're going to help, and so we diffuse that responsibility. Now, there's a very famous case that happened in New York a long time ago with a woman named Kitty Genovese, or Genovese, I think is how you say it. And so she was attacked, and there were a bunch of people who saw the attack happen, and yet nobody helped. And so at this point, you're going to pause this video and watch the video beneath this one that gives you a brief history of that and the research that followed from that, and you're going to answer a few questions on that. So at this point, pause this video, and I'll see you back here in a moment. All right, well, hopefully you learned something again about Kitty Genovese and just everything that happened there and how the diffusion of responsibility, again, put them in a position where, although they were highly criticized, the witnesses for not helping, what the psychologists were kind of showing was that generally we would have all done the same thing because of those factors. Okay, let's look at conflict now. Okay, why do we have conflict? What is conflict? First of all, conflict happens when opposing members of a group are in direct opposition to one another as they try to accomplish a similar goal. Obviously, a very easy example is in sports. Okay, so we want to win the game. Lexington Catholic wants to win the game. We can't both win the game at the same time, and tempers can flare. And you see players starting to get physical on the court. You can see the crowds, especially the student section, start chanting things back and forth that aren't so flattering or whatever else, and even parents get in the act and this and that. And so a conflict arises because both groups are pursuing a similar goal and they both can't achieve it simultaneously. And so now they're in opposition to one another. And so a couple things that can increase the potential for conflicts. One is what's called social traps. Now, this doesn't always happen. Okay, I want to make that clear. In fact, Adam Smith, in his famous book, The Wealth of Nations, Adam Smith, known as the first economist, he talked about more often than not in an economy, people do things that in such a way that even though it's benefiting them, it's also benefiting other people. The classic example is he says, why does a farmer get up at the crack of dawn every day for months on end to tend to their corn? Is it really just so he can have the satisfaction of putting corn on your table and so you can eat it for dinner? Or is it because he's going to get money for that corn? Well, of course he's doing it because he wants to get the money for the corn. But it's not our loss. We end up getting to have corn for dinner. And so a lot of times I want you to make clear, this is not always the case. There are times where somebody pursuing their own self-interest is also in the interest of others, but there are times where we harm the collective well-being by pursuing our own personal goals. An example would be, like if you want to use the economy, it would be pollution. I've got a business and I'm polluting, and so I'm pursuing wealth or I'm pursuing a successful business, and in the process, my pursuit of that goal is hurting the people in the community because I'm polluting. Okay, so social traps can certainly cause conflict. Then you have what's called mirror image perception. So try to follow this, it's a little bit tricky. So you've got two opposing groups, and what ends up happening is simultaneously they see the people of their own group as being good people, charitable, trustworthy, peaceful, ethical. The other side, on the other hand, they are nothing but evil and have ulterior motives and just despicable human beings, okay? And so one of the best examples of this, of course, politics, okay? There are people out there, if you're a Republican, anything a Republican does is just, the best thing ever, the best idea, the best whatever. If a Democrat came up with the same exact idea, it would be nothing but trash because the Democrats are just out to ruin America. And there are Democrats that feel the same way about Republicans. If a Democrat does it, it's got to be good. If a Republican does it, they have nothing but terrible motives and they want to destroy the country and this and that. And that's one of my pet peeves, when people can't see or judge the merits of policy. When we talk about politics, a policy on its own standing, but it's just all about the partisan politics. But they're falling prey to what we call mirror image perceptions. Now, what happens with mirror image perceptions, when you see the other person or the other group this way, it can create, this is an important term, self-fulfilling prophecies. So the idea is, okay, you think somebody's a jerk. Right or wrong, maybe they're not, but you think somebody's a jerk. Now, how do you treat a jerk? Well, you're probably going to be pretty cold toward that person. You're not going to be very, kind to them. You're not going to whatever, because they're jerks, right? They deserve it. Well, the problem is when you treat someone that way, guess how they're going to act in exchange? They're going to act like a jerk because essentially you've brought on that behavior, and then you're going to look at it and say, I knew they were a jerk. Look, I just knew it, right? But it's really because of how you're treating them. Now, we as teachers have to be particularly careful with this because this often happens in our classroom. Sometimes there's a kid that we can get, a student that we can get this perception of, well, they're just a bad student, or they can't learn, or this or that. And the problem is, when we as teachers, even if we don't do it consciously, if we have this mindset that this person's a bad student or they can't learn, we begin to treat them as such. When they have questions, we don't really attend to their questions. We kind of blow them off, or we just whatever, and we again don't act as nice to them as we do to other students that we think are bright or we think can learn. And then of course, because we're treating the student this way, they act cool toward us. They don't like coming into our classroom because of the way we're treating them as teachers. They don't like our class. They stop trying for our class because they have no interest in pleasing us because they don't like us. And then we as teachers say, I knew it. That kid is just as bad as I thought they were when they first walked into my classroom. And so this is something I know teachers need to be cognizant of as well, because we can end up fulfilling our own prophecy, as they call that. So anyway, so that's conflict. And then lastly, a couple things about cooperation. Okay, you got groups that have hostility toward one another. What can bring them together? Well, contact is a big one, right? If you don't know anybody who is of a different group, it could be a different race, different religion, different sexual orientation, things like that. If you have never met anybody, don't know anybody, they're kind of in the them category, right? It's those people. Well, when you get to know these people, oftentimes you find they're much more human than you thought they would be otherwise. They have more in common with you than you could have imagined. And so when you spend time around these people, and again, that doesn't always happen. You can put two groups of people together that are negative toward one another and their contacts with each other are also negative. That's not going to help the situation. But generally, being around people, kind of the mere exposure effect, which we've talked about already, can help increase or decrease hostility and increase cooperation and friendliness. Cooperation is a second one. What we found, and this is an important term, superordinate goals. When opposing groups are put in a situation where all of a sudden they have a goal, and a superordinate goal is a goal that can only be achieved with cooperation with the other groups. Again, it becomes, the situation tends to diffuse and things become friendlier. There have been movies, obviously, where people who are on different sides of war, okay, maybe during World War II, an American and a German, all of a sudden they find themselves off kind of by themselves, struggling to survive, and the only way they can survive is if they cooperate. Well, all of a sudden, that me versus you mentality kind of fades away as we're now in this common goal. They found that, for example, community among Americans, when after 9/11, when America was attacked, we stopped seeing people in terms of the color of their skin or their gender or their religion. If they were American, it was kind of like we're all in this together now. And it brought us closer together, and there were less of some of those feelings toward other groups. And so having common goals that you're forced to work together in order to achieve can help. And then generally communication. And again, when you're married, you're going to see this in particular. But a lot of times there's conflict that arises, and a lot of times it's simply a misunderstanding. It's a miscommunication of ideas or thoughts or feelings or intentions or things like that. And by sitting down and talking with the other person or the other group, you start to realize, again, they're not so bad. You have more in common than you thought. Their motives weren't as negative as you originally thought they would be. And so communication can resolve those and expose the commonality that you have among the group. So there you go, altruism, conflict, and cooperation. Again, you're going to have the questions that follow. And so if you have any questions, let me know. But like always, I hope to see you sooner than later. Till next time.